Let's talk about a four-star prospect that I think also really does fit Kentucky's program very well. Trent Noah, a 6'6", 200-pound shooting guard, small forward out of Harlan County High School in Baxter, Kentucky. He was originally committed to the South Carolina Gamecocks, did so, I believe, back in November. At least he signed his letter of intent to the Gamecocks back in November, and he decommitted today, May 7th, 2024. Here's what he had to say on Twitter with the caption Proverbs 16:9. He said, quote, "To begin, I would like to express my gratitude to the South Carolina basketball staff and fan base for embracing me as a Gamecock. After much thought, prayer, and extensive conversation with my family, I requested and was granted a release from my National Letter of Intent, NLI, with the University of South Carolina. I will be reopening my recruitment with hopes of pursuing basketball opportunities closer to home. I sincerely appreciate Coach Paris's genuine investment in me, both on and off the court, and his compassion and professionalism during this process. Please respect my decision. Thank you." You heard that right there. He wants to play somewhere closer to home. The kid from Harlan County High School in Kentucky. At this point, I'd be surprised if he doesn't end up a Wildcat. I mean, you go and look on 24/7 Sports today, he's already received a crystal ball projection to commit to Mark Pope and the Cats. And I think, again, he fits very well in this system. Take a look at what 24/7 Sports has to say about him. Adam Finkelstein, director of recruiting, he said, Trent Noah is a strong-bodied wing and an elite shooter off of the basketball. His game is based on the three-point line. He's not only one of the best in the class when it comes to making spot-up shots, and thus providing gravity as a floor spacer, something that Kentucky will love in the future with Pope, but also capable of making shots on the move. He's a heady offensive player and a good passer who knows how to play within offensive structure. Noah has a strong and fairly broad frame, which can allow him to defend some bigger players. He also is a solid wing rebounder. He needs to continue to work on his defensive quickness and his ability to create his own offense. Again, he averaged 20 points per game as a freshman for Baxter, Kentucky, out of Harlan County. He hit 60 of 143 three-pointers, being named honorable mention All-State. And then as a junior, Noah averaged 26.5 points per game and scored a total of 821 points during the course of the season. And then also just a fun little tidbit here. He has 3,707 points to his name during his high school career, which is unofficially the fifth most all-time in Kentucky basketball high school history. The kid's a baller. And he's also a pretty highly rated four-star at that. 105th nationally, according to the 24/7 Sports composite ratings, number 25 small forward, and number 2 player in the state of Kentucky. Again, I would be surprised if this kid does not end up becoming a Wildcat. And I think, again, a lot of this has to do with the fact that I think he fits just so well with what Mark Pope wants to do. And I don't necessarily think, if you look at that scouting report, I don't necessarily think Noah would have to do a bunch of different things, creating his own shot and maybe becoming a quicker defender, which are a couple of different knocks against him. I don't think he's going to have to do anything like serious in year one because of just how much, crazy to say it, kind of like depth Kentucky is building up in the backcourt through the portal this offseason. I think it would be next year when you really start to see Noah become more involved with the rotation and be an important piece for Pope within his kind of 5-out, 4-out, 1-in, up-tempo, three-point shooting offensive system. Now, you'll have to pair him, I think, to start with some really good passing point guards, which I think Kentucky has a couple in Butler and Carissa. And actually, no, they've got 3, including Travis Perry, another Kentucky high school product. So I think Noah would be fine. I think it would be an excellent addition just as far as stereotype for what this offensive system wants to do. Again, I think he needs to improve on his defensive quickness, not necessarily his speed getting up and down the court, just quickness as far as reaction to various things on that end of the floor, which I'm pretty confident Kentucky staff can coach him into. Trent Noah, would love to have you come on down, be a Wildcat. We'll see what happens. He's already, again, received a crystal ball, so we'll see if Kentucky's able to get him. All right, let's round out the show today talking about what the lineup would look like if Kentucky, hypothetically, just for fun here, let's say Kentucky gets both Lanier and Noah. What would that look like for Kentucky basketball? We'll talk about that in just a second. Before I do that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at Monopoly Go. We got to pause here to talk a little bit about Monopoly Go, and I know what you're saying. We've already talked about it quite a bit, but there's just so many fun different things to talk about in this game. In Monopoly Go, we've talked a lot about the competitive side of things against your friends, but you can team up with your friends actually for timed tournaments where you can work together to build up each other's boards. There's so much to win together, and there's so many different awesome prizes to unlock. So much more to get on top of that, like unique stickers, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, and then hilarious emojis to taunt your friends whenever you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every single day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on with Monopoly Go. All right, wrapping up the Tuesday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. Let's talk for a second about this roster. Let's talk about the roster if Chaz Lanier and Trent Noah were to commit to Kentucky. I'm going to start here at the top, work my way down. We're going to talk a ton about this during the offseason, about what we think the starting lineup will look like, what the rotation will look like. I want to be very clear here as we begin things. And I've said this on a show recently, and I'll say it again. Lamont Butler, I believe, is going to start at point. That is my prediction. That is my projection. Lamont Butler will be the starting point guard for the Kentucky Wildcats for the 2024-25 season. Kerr Kriisa, the transfer from West Virginia, I think will come off the bench behind him. There's a world where Kriisa starts at the 2. There's a world where he even starts at the 1. But I believe what's more likely is Butler starts at the 1, somebody else starts at the 2, Kriisa comes off the bench. Maybe you could start Kriisa at the 2 because of just how good of a three-point shooter he is, and then you could kind of have them kind of work back and forth with ball handling duties because, again, Kriisa, I think, is the best passer on this team right now. Travis Perry, I think, is the guy that's kind of third string here, quote-unquote, to come off the bench behind Butler and Kriisa. I think Perry could also get a little bit of run at shooting guard. Speaking of shooting guard, Chaz Lanier. If Kentucky gets him, I think he's the starter at the 2, no questions asked. Colin Chandler, the 4-star prospect. I think also Perry could work here as well. And then Trent Noah, if you want to, you can play him at the 2 in certain rotations, but I think Noah will work more primarily behind Kobe Brea and Otega Owe out of Dayton and Oklahoma. I think Brea will get the start at the 3. And I think Owe will come off the bench. Again, Noah, I think, can rotate in here a little bit as well. Could you see Colin Chandler slide down? Maybe, if you really wanted to get funky with it. And I think Kentucky, because of how many different wings that they have that can actually shoot the basketball, you can really put out some more. You can put out some bigger bodied lineups and then some smaller lineups as well. Kentucky's got some very interesting players to work with. So many different rotations I think that you can do just on paper. We'll have to see how this team actually operates with each other. And maybe it's a little bit more restrictive than I anticipate it being by position, I should say. But Butler, Lanier, Brea, I think they're your 3 starters from the 1 to the 3. At the 4, until Kentucky picks up a guy like a Chor, Jackson Robinson, who have you, I think that Andrew Carr is going to be your starter at that power forward spot. Solid at Wake Forest, good outside shooter, really good rebounder, good rim protector. There's nobody else really to challenge him for this position because he's the most power forward-like player on the roster. He played the most at power forward at Wake. There's not really anything to argue here. I think it makes the most sense unless you get somebody like Robinson, at which point I think Kentucky does end up going with Robinson to start because I find it hard to believe. I know Robinson came off the bench at BYU. I know he was the 6th man. I get that. I find it hard to believe that Robinson's going to want to come off the bench again to finish out his collegiate career as somebody who's a potential NBA draft pick. That's just me. I don't think we should normalize that because of what happened with Kentucky and Coach Cal. I don't think you should normalize having draft picks come off your bench, especially if you don't have them in the starting lineup. That's just my 2 cents. I don't think that's crazy. We saw that this last year. And then to wrap up at the 5, I think Amari Williams will start over Brandon Garrison. I think this makes sense as well. Williams, the more experienced player, I think right now just has more under his arsenal. I think overall it's just like the defensive prospect that Kentucky needs out there guarding the paint with a decent amount of minutes to throw at him as well. But Garrison, I've talked about this over and over and over and over again, raved on the show about just how good I think Brandon Garrison can be in the future for the Wildcats. I think he can be excellent, flat out. I think he can be really, really good, the former McDonald's All-American. So that's my starting lineup. That is my bench, just to give you it one more time. Butler, Lanier, Brea, Carr, and Williams, if they do get Lanier. And then the bench. Kirk Risa, Travis Perry, Colin Chandler, Trent Noah, Otega Owe, and Brandon Garrison.